Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm very happy that you are here with me today, taking another step toward improving your English. My name is Alex, and in this podcast, we talk about ideas, strategies, and experiences that can help you become more confident and fluent in English. If you are someone who sometimes feels that learning English is difficult, slow, or even frustrating, don't worry. Many people feel exactly the same way. But today we are going to talk about something that can completely change the way you learn English. Today's topic is about the incredible power of practice. Many students think that learning English quickly depends on talent, intelligence, or a special ability for languages. However, the truth is much simpler and much more encouraging than that. The real secret behind fast improvement in English is not talent. It is not a perfect memory. It is not expensive courses or complicated grammar books. The real secret is consistent and meaningful practice. Practice is what transforms knowledge into real ability. You can watch many English videos, read grammar explanations, or memorize hundreds of vocabulary words. But if you do not practice using the language, it becomes very difficult to truly communicate. Practice is a moment when your brain begins to connect words, sounds, ideas, and emotions in a natural way. It is a moment when English stops being just something you study and starts becoming something you actually use in your life. In this episode, we will explore why practice is so powerful, how it changes the way your brain learns languages, and how simple daily practice can help you improve your English much faster than you might expect. So stay with me. Relax, and let's discover together why practice can be the most powerful tool in your English learning journey. Part 2, How Practice Changes Your Brain. One of the most fascinating things about learning a language is how the brain adapts and grows through practice. When you practice English regularly, your brain begins to create new connections between sounds, meanings, and ideas. At first, everything may feel slow and confusing. You may need time to think about each sentence, search for the right words, and remember grammar rules. But as you continue practicing, your brain becomes more efficient and more comfortable with the language. Think about learning English like learning to ride a bicycle. The first time someone tries to ride a bicycle, it feels difficult and even a little scary. The person must concentrate on balance, movement, direction, and control all at the same time. But after practicing again and again, something interesting happens. The brain begins to understand the movement automatically, and riding the bicycle becomes natural and easy. The same thing happens with English. When you practice speaking, listening, reading, and writing regularly, your brain slowly begins to process the language faster. Words appear more easily in your mind. Sentences become smoother. Understanding conversations becomes less stressful. Eventually, you reach a moment when you realize that you are no longer translating every sentence in your head. Instead, you begin to think directly in English. This transformation does not happen because someone is a genius or has a special talent. It happens because the brain learns through repetition and experience. Every time you practice English, you are strengthening the pathways in your brain that make communication easier and more natural. Part 3, The Most Powerful Types of Practice. Not all types of practice are equally effective. Some forms of practice can help you improve your English much faster because they actively involve your brain and force you to use the language in real situations. Understanding these types of practice can make a big difference in your learning progress. One of the most powerful forms of practice is speaking. Speaking requires your brain to create sentences in real time, organize your ideas, and choose the correct words quickly. Even when you make mistakes, speaking is extremely valuable because those mistakes teach your brain what works and what needs improvement. Many students avoid speaking because they feel embarrassed or afraid of making errors. But the truth is that speaking is one of the fastest ways to grow in a language. Another powerful practice method is reading out loud. When you read out loud, You are not only practicing pronunciation, but also training your brain to connect written words with spoken sounds. This type of practice improves fluency, rhythm, and confidence. It also helps you become more comfortable with the natural flow of English sentences. Listening is another essential part of practice. By listening to podcasts, conversations, movies, or interviews in English, your brain becomes familiar with the natural speed and pronunciation of real English speakers. At first, it may feel difficult to understand everything, but with regular listening practice, your ears slowly become trained to recognize patterns, sounds, and expressions. Finally, writing can also be an excellent practice tool. Writing allows you to organize your thoughts more carefully and helps reinforce vocabulary and grammar structures. When you write regularly, you become more aware of how sentences are formed and how ideas are expressed clearly in English. Part 4. The Power of Daily Practice. One of the biggest mistakes many learners make is believing that they need long study sessions in order to improve their English. While long study sessions can sometimes be helpful, they are not always necessary. In fact, small daily practice sessions can be much more powerful for long-term progress. When you practice English for a short time every day, you keep the language active in your mind. Your brain continues to process and reinforce what you learned the day before. This constant exposure helps vocabulary stay fresh in your memory and allows grammar patterns to become more familiar over time. Imagine practicing English for just 20 minutes every day. In 1 week, that becomes more than 2 hours of practice. In 1 month, that becomes many hours of continuous exposure to the language. Over several months, those small daily sessions accumulate into a powerful learning experience that can dramatically improve your confidence and ability to communicate. Daily practice also helps reduce fear and hesitation. When English becomes part of your everyday routine, it stops feeling like a difficult academic subject and starts feeling like a natural tool for communication. The more often you interact with a language, the more comfortable and confident you become using it. Consistency is truly the hidden secret behind rapid language improvement. It is not about studying perfectly. It is about showing up every day and giving your brain the opportunity to learn, adapt, and grow. Part 5. Your future English depends on practice. As we come to the end of today's episode, I want you to reflect on one important idea. Progress in English is not determined by where you start, but by how often you practice. Every learner begins at a different level, with different experiences and challenges, but the one factor that consistently leads to improvement is regular practice. You do not need to speak perfectly in order to practice. In fact, mistakes are a natural and necessary part of learning. Every time you try to express an idea in English, your brain becomes stronger and more flexible. Each attempt, even if it is imperfect, moves you closer to fluency. Think about your future for a moment. Imagine that you begin practicing English every single day, even if it is only for a short period of time. After a few weeks, you will notice that words come to your mind more easily. After a few months, conversations will feel less intimidating. And after a year of consistent practice, your ability to understand and speak English could be dramatically different. The journey to fluency is not about speed or perfection. It is about persistence, curiosity, and the willingness to keep practicing even when progress feels slow. Every word you read, every sentence you speak, and every conversation you attempt is building the skills that will eventually make English feel natural to you. So keep practicing, keep learning, and remember that every small effort you make today is an investment in your future fluency. Part 6. Overcoming the fear of speaking. One of the biggest obstacles many English learners face is the fear of speaking. This fear can appear in many forms. Some people are afraid of making mistakes. Others worry about their pronunciation, and many learners feel embarrassed when they cannot express their ideas clearly. These feelings are completely normal, and almost every person who learns a new language experiences them at some point. However, The important thing to remember is that fear disappears when practice becomes part of your routine, when you start speaking English regularly. Even if it is only a few sentences a day, your confidence slowly begins to grow. At first, you might pause often, search for words, or feel unsure about your grammar. But every time you speak, you are training your brain to become more comfortable with the language. Gradually, the sentences start to come more naturally, and the fear begins to lose its power over you. Practice teaches you something extremely important. Mistakes are not failures. In fact, mistakes are one of the most powerful teachers in language learning. When you say something incorrectly and then learn the correct way to express it, your brain remembers that lesson much more strongly than if you had simply read it in a grammar book. Over time, you will notice that speaking English no longer feels like a stressful challenge, but instead becomes an exciting opportunity to communicate. The key is not waiting until you feel ready to speak. The key is practicing until speaking becomes normal. Part 7. Creating a daily practice routine. Another important secret to improving English quickly is building a simple and realistic daily routine. Many learners begin with a lot of motivation, but after a few weeks they stop practicing because their study routine feels too difficult or too time-consuming. The truth is that an effective routine does not need to be complicated. In fact, the most successful routines are often the simplest ones. Imagine starting your day by listening to a short English podcast while you eat breakfast or prepare for your day. This small habit helps your ears become familiar with the sounds and rhythm of the language. Even if you do not understand every word, your brain is still learning and adapting to the patterns of English. Later in the day, you could spend a few minutes reading a short article, a story, or even a social media post in English. Reading exposes you to new vocabulary and helps you understand how sentences are structured. If you read out loud, you also practice pronunciation and speaking at the same time. Finally, before the day ends, you could practice speaking or writing a few sentences about your day. You might describe something interesting that happened, share your thought about a topic, or simply repeat phrases you learned earlier. These small daily actions may seem simple, but together they create a powerful learning routine that helps your English improve consistently. Part 8. The importance of patience in language learning. While practice can help you improve quickly, it is also important to understand that learning a language requires patience. Many learners expect immediate results, and when progress feels slow, they become discouraged. However, language learning is more like planting a tree than pressing a button. Growth happens gradually, and sometimes the progress is invisible at first. When you practice English regularly, your brain is constantly absorbing new information, even when you do not notice it immediately. Vocabulary words, sentence patterns, and pronunciation habits slowly become part of your internal knowledge. After weeks or months of consistent exposure, you may subtly realize that you understand conversations that once seemed impossible. Patience also allows you to enjoy the process of learning. Instead of focusing only on the final goal of fluency, you begin to appreciate the small victories along the way. Understanding a new phrase, successfully expressing an idea, or following a conversation in English can all be exciting moments that remind you how far you have come. The most successful language learners are not necessarily the fastest learners. They are the ones who continue practicing even when progress feels slow. They trust the process and understand that every small step eventually leads to meaningful improvement. Part 9. Turning English into part of your life. One of the most effective ways to accelerate your English progress is to integrate the language into your everyday life. Instead of treating English as something you study only during a specific time of the day, you can begin to surround yourself with the language in many different situations. For example, you can watch movies or series in English with subtitles, listen to music in English while you relax, or follow English-speaking creators online. These activities may feel like entertainment, but they are also powerful learning experiences because they expose you to natural language in real contexts. Another great strategy is to think in English during simple daily activities. While walking, cooking, or organizing your room, you can describe what you're doing in English, even if the sentences are simple. This practice helps your brain develop the habit of using English to express thoughts and ideas. When English becomes part of your daily environment, learning stops feeling like a task and starts feeling like a natural part of your life. The more often you interact with the language, the faster your mind adapts and becomes comfortable using it. Part 10, the journey continues. As we reach this part of the podcast, it is important to remember that learning English is a journey, not a destination. Fluency does not appear overnight, but every moment of practice brings you closer to the level of confidence and communication that you desire. If you continue practicing consistently, you will eventually reach a point where English feels much more natural than it did when you first started. Conversations will become easier. Understanding movies and podcasts will feel less challenging, and expressing your ideas will require less effort. The most inspiring part of this journey is realizing that improvement is always possible. No matter your current level, every day presents a new opportunity to practice, learn something new, and strengthen your ability to communicate in English. So keep practicing, keep exploring the language, and most importantly, keep believing in your ability to grow. Your progress may begin with small steps, but those steps can lead to extraordinary results over time. And in our next episode, we will continue exploring more powerful techniques that can help you accelerate your English learning journey even further. Stay curious, keep practicing, and I will see you in the next episode.